You ever notice how some of history's absolute craziest sounding ideas somehow end up becoming, just common sense? Well, today we're going to dig into this really fascinating pattern, a journey from something sounding completely ridiculous to being totally accepted, and what that might tell us about how we figure out what's true.
So what do germs, meteorites, and hand-washing all have in common? I know, it sounds like the start of a really weird joke, but the answer actually points to this incredibly powerful trend throughout history. Every single one of these things, which seems so obvious to us now, was once considered completely absurd by the experts of the day.
And this pattern, it almost always unfolds in 4 stages. First up, some new claim pops up that just seems to defy all conventional wisdom. Then, stage 2, it gets widely mocked, laughed out of the room. But then, evidence starts to trickle in, slowly but surely. And finally, the thing that was once laughable becomes bedrock, accepted reality.
Okay, so to make sure we're all on the same page, let's first look at some real-world examples from science and history where this exact pattern played out. No controversy here, just a solid foundation.
This slide right here shows you just how common this pattern is. I mean, take the Hittite civilization. For centuries, scholars were absolutely insistent that this massive empire, which is mentioned in the Old Testament, was just a biblical fiction. Then, boom, 1906, archaeologists literally unearthed their capital city. The same thing happened with King David. He was dismissed as a myth, kind of like King Arthur, until an inscription was found in 1993 that mentioned the House of David. From continental drift to the existence of giant squid, the pattern just holds up time and time again.
So this pattern isn't just a fun little history lesson. It actually gives us a framework for looking at claims that seem, well, pretty outrageous at first. And this is where the analysis we're exploring takes a really bold step. It asks if this same journey, from implausible to plausible, can be applied to the claims of a more modern religious figure. And that brings us right to the central question of this whole explainer. The material we're looking at zooms in on the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement and analyzes his story through this very specific lens of plausibility.
Now let's be honest. To our modern ears, Joseph Smith's core claims sound, well, pretty strange. Translating an ancient record using a stone he put in a hat, angelic visitations, saying he revised the Bible, these are not exactly everyday occurrences. They seem, at first glance, to completely defy convention.
But here is the absolute crucial point the author makes. The argument is that over the last 200 years, the trajectory of historical and archaeological evidence has consistently moved toward supporting these claims, not away from them, just like all those scientific examples we just looked at.
So to really test this idea, this analysis does something fascinating. And yeah, a little unconventional. It tries to score historical authenticity on a scale from 1 to 100. It's an attempt to actually quantify which way the evidence is heading.
So what score does this framework give to Joseph Smith's claims based on the evidence we have today? 65 out of 100. Now that's a score that suggests the claims are way more plausible than not, with a really clear positive trend line. And this isn't just some random number pulled out of thin air. The way the score is calculated is by weighing the positive, corroborating evidence against the negative or, unresolved historical issues. So the framework gives 50 points for strong positive evidence, but then it subtracts 25 points for historical complications. So the positive points come from stuff there's just no way Joseph Smith could have known back in 1830. Things like the discovery of a tribal area called NHM in Arabia, a place that perfectly matches a location in the Book of Mormon, or the use of ancient Hebrew literary structures like chiasmus. The deductions? Well, they come from the unresolved questions, like certain anachronisms or the ongoing debates about witness credibility. Okay, so a score of 65 is pretty interesting, but it really needs some context, right? I mean, what does that even mean? So to give us a benchmark, the analysis applies the exact same scoring method to another figure whose claims have had a lot more time to mature, Jesus Christ.
And the biggest variable here is time. Joseph Smith's claims are less than 200 years old, which is still kind of in its historical infancy. Jesus' claims, on the other hand, have had 2,000 years to be tested, debated, and picked apart by countless generations of historians. And the fact that they haven't been disproven over that much time, well, that becomes powerful evidence all by itself.
This table lays it all out really clearly. Joseph Smith's historical status is strong for sure, but it's still developing. Jesus' status is fully established, and this difference in time and maturity directly affects their final scores. It shows how a claim can actually get stronger as it weathers centuries of analysis.
So this framework gives Jesus an authenticity score of 85 out of 100. That's extremely high. It reflects the nearly universal agreement on his historical existence and just the incredible stability of his claims for 2,000 years. But notice it's not a perfect 100, and that's on purpose.
And that right there leads us to the climax of this entire argument. Why isn't the score 100? Well, according to this theological framework, no divine claim can or even should get a perfect score on a purely human scale of evidence.
So you have to ask the question, right? If the evidence for figures like Jesus is so positive, or the trajectory for Joseph Smith is heading that way, what's holding them back from a perfect score? Is the evidence just flawed, or is there something else going on entirely?
The author calls this the faith gap. And the idea is that if God provided such overwhelming, undeniable proof that it actually forced you to believe, it would completely destroy our human agency. There would be no choice left, and because of that, no room for actual faith. And I think this quote just captures the whole idea perfectly. That final, unprovable little gap. It isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's the space that's intentionally left for all the core principles of a religious life to exist: faith, seeking answers, and personal commitment.
So, to wrap up the main thesis, the fact that we don't have absolute coercive proof isn't a weakness in the evidence. Instead, it's presented as the very signature of how a divine being might choose to reveal truth. In a way that invites us to ask questions and rewards those who seek, but never forces the person just watching from the sidelines. The takeaway is that evidence can get you really, really close, but it's designed to leave that final step up to you.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. When we're looking at any huge, monumental claim, is that gap just short of 100% certainty a sign of weak evidence? Or, as this analysis suggests, could it actually be an intentional and even necessary feature of a design that values our freedom to choose what we believe?